All right, so you've probably wondered this yourself, right? Why do really smart, accomplished politicians sometimes say things that just sound completely nuts? Well, today we're going to dig into Syed Sameer's Narrative Power Our Citizen to figure out what's really going on. It turns out there's a wild strategy behind all that political noise, and we're also going to talk about how we can reclaim our own power in a world that's basically designed to keep us distracted. Okay, so let's jump right in with this puzzle that just doesn't seem to make any sense at first glance. I mean, really think about it for a second. We see these people who are, brilliant strategists, super disciplined. They climb all the way to the top, and then they get on a stage and say something that sounds, frankly, kind of childish or just totally disconnected from what's actually happening. So, what is the deal? What is really going on? Well, here's the kicker. The source argues this isn't some slip up. It's not a mistake at all. It is a very, very calculated strategy. See, in the world we live in now, just this constant storm of information, a calm, well-reasoned argument, it's like trying to whisper in a hurricane. It's just going to get completely lost. Okay, so to really get why this strategy is so effective, we actually have to look inside our own heads at a pretty basic shortcut our brains love to take. So this pretty much breaks it down. You can think of it like we have two brains. There's the fast, reactive, emotional brain, and then there's the slow, careful, logical brain. And what modern politics has gotten really good at is completely sidestepping our logical brain and talking straight to that emotional one. Because the second that feelings like fear or anger or even pride get activated, poof, logic just kind of goes out the window for a minute. And that right there is the whole game. This little brain shortcut gets turned into a tool, you could even say a weapon, to get us to react instantly. The goal is not to have a deep, thoughtful conversation about some complicated issue. Nope. The goal is to make you pick a side right now without even thinking about it. All right, now let's zoom out. Let's take this psychological trick and see what happens when it gets plugged into what we can call the modern narrative machine. This is where things get really amplified. You see, a leader today isn't just one person talking. They've got this whole system working for them. It starts with someone saying something emotional, maybe even outrageous. Then you've got PR teams watching the numbers like hawks, seeing what gets the clicks, the shares, the reactions. And once they find it, the social media algorithms kick in, and boom, they blast that one viral thing to the top of everyone's feed. It's a game. And in this game, the message that hits you in the gut is always the one that wins. So here's the really important thing to understand. The strategy isn't necessarily to hide the truth with a lie. It's much cleverer than that. It's to drown the truth in just a massive ocean of noise. And in that kind of environment, a quiet, reasonable point, it doesn't stand a chance. It's like trying to stop a tsunami with a bucket. Okay, so what does all this mean for us? For the average person just trying to live their life? Well, this system basically pushes us into one of two different roles. And I think this is such an important point the source makes. It's not that people are dumb or easily tricked. We're just tired, right? You're dealing with work, with family, with everything life throws at you, plus this nonstop fire hose of information online. Of course, it's easier to just grab onto a simple story that tells you who to blame instead of trying to untangle some super complex issue. So this environment kind of forces us to pick a team. On one side, you have the fan. The fan runs purely on emotion, reacts without thinking, and honestly, is pretty easy to manipulate. But on the other side, you have the citizen. The citizen runs on thought. They ask questions, they pay attention to what actually gets done, and this is a big one, they remember the promises that were made. Okay, so we've seen how the machine works. Now for the good part. How do we fight back? How do we actually step into that role of the citizen and take our power back? Well, according to the source, the secret isn't getting lost in all the big, loud national debates. Real power, real change, it's found when we shift our focus to the things we can actually see and touch in our everyday lives. That's where we can make a real, tangible difference. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. Real power, real accountability, it's local. We're talking about the roads you drive on, the water from your tap, the schools your kids go to, the local hospital, the power grid. The stuff that actually affects your day-to-day life. Because, let's be honest, it's way harder for a politician to spin a fancy story about a giant pothole that you have to swerve around every single morning, right? And this is how we actually change the game. Yelling on social media feels good for a second, but it disappears. A written complaint, though, a documented request, following up again and again, that creates a paper trail. It builds a record that the system can't just ignore. It forces them to give you an answer. And that's how you move out of the emotional shouting match and into actual, real-world accountability. And at the end of the day, this is really the core of it all. This whole journey to being an effective citizen, it isn't about finding some perfect hero to follow. It's about training ourselves, training our own minds to hear that siren song of emotional noise and just not fall for it. It's about learning to see through the chaos and focus on what really truly matters right here in our own communities. So all of this leaves us with one last really powerful thought. The source material uses two great words, sure, which means noise, and hush, which means awareness or consciousness. And the big idea is that real, lasting change never starts in the deafening shore of the mob. It always begins with the quiet hush inside each and every one of us. So I guess the question for you is, which will you choose to be? Just another voice adding to the noise, or a steady force for awareness?